Let's roll. This is Countercharge, your podcast for ranks, flanks, and kings of war. Join your hosts as they delve into the world of Panithor and bring you worldwide coverage of all things Kings of War.
Welcome to Countercharge. I'm Matt Gilbert.
I'm Ralph Enough.
And I am Jeremy Duvall. We got a fantastic episode for you guys today. We're happy to welcome Matt Gilbert from Mantic. And we're just going to get right into it, Rob. We got a bunch of awesome questions from the community all around the excitement of 4th edition coming out. Everyone knows Matt, so we're just going to get right into these questions. We'll go with this one first, Matt. And Rory was curious about a couple of things. In designing 4th, how did you guys sort of balance in the vision, mission, values of 4th, sort of what the competitive gamer wanted versus also trying to make the game approachable to garage gamers? Was that sort of a line of thinking you guys had during development, is balancing for both those groups?
It is, and I guess in two halves. So there was from the core rules point of view, and the presentation of the core rules, and then from the army lists point of view, we were quite aware that the development of the game to where it had got to had been quite focused and quite driven by the competitive side, by the tournament scene, not just in the rules, but also in the army lists, which isn't a bad thing. It keeps the game as fresh and balanced from that point of view, but it does leave the casual gamer behind a little bit, or can do. And when you look at, and this is true for most game systems, the people who are usually the most vocal are usually the tournament players, but they're probably single figure percentages, 5% or less of your actual player base. So while they may be the vocal in driving and the most passionate about driving the game forwards, it's all the people that you don't necessarily hear from that are the people that play the game more, and that kind of get pulled along. So Alessio's talked about this. From a new gamer's point of view, we felt that the rules had got to a place that obviously very, very tight and covered everything in a lot of detail, but actually were quite inaccessible as a rule set for introducing to new people, and obviously a lot of those people are going to be there. Therefore, your casual gamers, your 95% or whatever it is. So, from a core rules point of view, it was definitely very much a strip it back to here's just the core rules. Here's just what you need to play with. Forget advanced play. Forget tournaments. This is your beer and pretzels clean game. And then we'll add in the things. Then we'll talk to the tournament players and say, okay, what we think we solved these problems. What other things haven't we tackled yet? With the new rules changes, what things do you foresee? Playing it through in theory or playing it through on the table. What have you come up with? And we'll either answer those in the rules if we can do in a clean way, or we'll tackle them in an advanced section. And the list development was very, very similar. So I knew what I wanted to do in terms of the lists, but I then approached it from my personal, quite casual garage gamer point of view, and how I saw things would fit and how they might go. And then we took it out to the play team, the playtest team, who were, and it was the tournament players there, which looked at them and went, "What are you doing? That's mad. Why have you done that?"
Yeah.
Knock them back into shape. But I was still sitting there controlling that, and then I could veto stuff and say, no, I want that there, either for commercial reasons, or no, for flavour, or for, no, I don't want that yet, or yes, I am taking that unit out, but we'll bring it back later once I've got, if I've got a plan for models for it, that sort of thing. So yeah, we were aware of both, and obviously where we'd come to with I guess we felt a little bit leaving that garage gamer behind, so we're very focused on that this time.
And since that garage gamer sometimes either doesn't use or isn't as vocal or as out there in the community. Was that sort of an intentional aspect of testing, is trying to get the game in front of maybe players who weren't as well vested in 3.5 or didn't quite know the game? Were you guys trying to have Fourth go through sort of that lens of, well, I didn't really play Kings of War at all that much, so let me try this game and give you sort of like that fresh garage perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we asked for that with the play testers. Now, certainly with staff play testing with Alessio and things like that, it was people that had either not played for years, back first or second edition, or never played Kings of War at all. There are staff that just haven't played it at all. So they were encouraged to come along and then give their opinion. Could you understand the rules? Was it engaging? What didn't you understand? That sort of thing. So not the tournament player or the veteran that knew the game. We gave it as much as we could to as well to people who had never seen it before or not seen it for a long, long time to get their view on it as well.
I'm curious, as being like involved in the community and all this stuff. Often we joke around different groups sometimes play the different games, right? Like us in America play Kings of War, and then sometimes we'll talk with our Australia friends or our UK friends, and sometimes the version of the game that they're playing is very different. I was wondering if you could maybe speak to that, or how challenging or how valuable is it to hear from different geographical places, like from the UK guys, the Australia guys, the US, and sort of what they want from the game? Because I think sometimes it's different. Or can you speak a little bit about both the benefit and maybe some of the challenges of having Kings of War being truly a global game, of trying to create an edition that you feel is going to resonate with people, from across the world?
Yeah, absolutely. And even within a region, the different groups, there'll be different metas within areas as well. But yeah, I mean that definitely happens from across on a global spread, and it's something we've always tried to do with the RC. Is not to have too many RC members from a particular region. Not too many in the UK or not too many in the US or whatever, and tried to have a mix. Now that presents challenges in terms of time zones and getting everyone together. So to at least have conversations with everyone in the room rather than disconnected ones where people are talking over there and people are talking over there, and they only get together digitally and they're missing each other by 8 hours or whatever it is. So from the play testers that we had, beyond the staff and things like that, were put together by the RC in their regions. And then later on, we introduced some people from some other countries as well. But I think it's very important to have input from all of those different places, not just from the competitive scene, but the casual one as well. But to understand play styles and things like that. So you might find one country is particularly defensive at the moment in the way that they play, or quite technical, or very casual, or et cetera, et cetera. And people build lists differently in different places as well, which is probably part of that region's psyche too. So, and I think this may be a question that comes up later, but I'll tackle it now. And if it does, then we've already answered it. And that's the RC going forwards. The RC as it is at the moment, I've disbanded. So new edition, new group. The current the RC and the way it's been structured all the way through the current editions are obviously hugely passionate fans of the game, done an incredible job keeping the rules fresh, keeping the army lists fresh, etc., etc. We wanted a different approach for this edition. So rather than a rules committee, I'm going to create a core playtesting group, and it will be spread across regions. So we'll have Germany, France, UK, US, Australia, Norway. I've reached out to all these regions with key people in each one, and a mix of casual gamers, garage gamers, and tournament players that can then feed back through into that group, and they can feed back problems with the rules and things like that, which Alessio will tackle as the games designer, and then that can go back out to them and they can test his solutions, etc. But that group will help me, and I'll be in charge of the lists. They will help me develop those lists, keep things balanced with the feedback from all around the world on what's broken, what's the wrong points, what units do people like, not like, etc., etc. So we can keep those Clash of Kings style updates going on all the army lists, while they help me also develop the lists for the books going forwards as well. So that group's going to be more focused with me on the lists, but feeding back to Alessio on the core rules mechanics, and obviously play testing any solutions that he wants to experiment with. But yeah, that's how it's going to be going forwards. But I wanted a big geographic fill there.
Will this group also be helping in collecting the data to kind of give you a sense of where the armies are and where the game is balance-wise?
Well, exactly that, yeah. But we also get a lot of that through the companion, of course, because we've got tournament results in there. We've got everyone's army lists in there. We can see what people are taking, what people are not taking. And I used a lot of that data when developing the fourth lists. What are people taking? What are people not taking? If I take this out now, what percentage of people are actually probably using this? Actually, it's almost none. So I can remove that now. We can then look at it. Do we want models for that later and bring it back as something super cool that everyone's going to want? Well, yeah, let's do that now. That sort of thing. So yeah, we definitely data-driven decisions as well as from the heart.
This whole new philosophy, right, of the invasion book, right, where is we have all our basic lists, and then over X amount of time we're going to get this new invasion book, which is going to be sort of adding in me and my metaphors, right, adding in the special spices. We're stirring the stew up, we're adding all those great flavors. It's sort of looking in that in sort of against the once a year Clash of Kings for you and your workload. Go over. Are you sort of going to be spending more times with kings over the next year than maybe you have in the past, sort of guiding these? Because this is a different philosophy for Mantic, right? Of not all the lists at once, and then let's just tweak Clash of Kings once a year. Now we have these bigger supplements coming out at more regular intervals. Is Kings going to be sort of more of your day-to-day going through this next year?
Yes, I think it will be. I'll be more involved, probably as involved as I was back in kind of second edition and early third, at which point, my focus shifted to loads of other stuff. So the RC kind of shouldered a lot of what was going on. But yes, so taking that back in-house, if you like, but not wanting to lose the link with the community, the link with the players, and have them involved in helping shape the list and keeping them fresh, etc., etc. But absolutely, it's going to be more. There's going to be more work done by the studio on Kings of War for this edition, for sure.
I think you walk that edge, right? Which is, in many ways, the rules committee. And remind me if I'm wrong, but I think, wasn't that how you first got involved in Mantic, as you were working with some of the community-driven rules design and rules help?
I was a Mantic fan for ages, and then I became a Pathfinder. And then, yes, I was on the first Kings of War Rules Committee, and then I was the first chair of it. Helped put the Uncharted Empires book together, etc., and second edition and everything else. So you can blame me for a lot of the lore of going forward from the early days.
Yeah, it's been a great resource for Kings to have this group. But on the other hand, it's a group of people who are volunteering their time. They're not professional game designers, right? So they're really trying. So I think there's been this push and pull and this tension maybe of how much can we put on the rules committee, and then how much do we need to be doing in-house, right? So that is nice that, we have Alessio and we have some of this more sort of the professionalization of the rules design, and maybe focusing the rules committee on not needing to do that so much, instead of, okay, here are the rules that we have. You guys test it. Did we miss anything? How does it feel? What are people saying? Is that sort of like within the kind of umbrella of your philosophy of what you guys hope to have moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think it probably got to a point where they'd shouldered a little bit too much, the RC, and it wasn't fair. And you're right. Giving it back to Alessio as the games designer, the professional games designer, and that's why I'm changing it from the RC, so the rules committee, to the core playtesting group to kind of reflect exactly what they're doing. But as part of their remit is to work with me on the list, so we don't lose that connection and that idea that the players are helping to shape and balance the lists for the game.
Well, let's jump in. Let's get some specifics out of the way. Do we know, companion-wise, is companion going to be updated the day that the rules come up, or is there a delay?
That's the last thing Elliot told me. He said, yep, definitely doing it. So I hope he's doing it right now. He's getting it ready.
Do we know if Companion will continue to support third edition for a time while there's this transition?
The idea is that it will do, so you'll be able to do both, because I think there'll be some tournaments and events that are still scheduled for third edition. So I don't think think he's intending on dropping one and then bringing up the other one. They'll both be in parallel for a while before one goes away, and it may be that people always want that legacy 3.5 available in a kind of history section. I don't know if that's possible for him to do, but I imagine it is if they're in parallel. It's just whether how long he does that for. I don't know that exact plan.
While we're on the companion, I'm just curious your thoughts, Matt, as someone in the industry. It seems like the virtual companion space, whether it's Mantic or whatever game system, that seems almost now like just a de facto part. Most miniature games have their list builder virtually or have their, like, how important do you think, like, and for you guys, you took it one step forward, right? You guys have the Vault, which is like an actual in-house STL library. But how important for you when you're thinking about game design, rules deployment, of making sure that companion piece fits seamlessly into your guys' planning?
We're certainly stepping up our digital, so it's going to become more and more integrated into our planning. But up until this point, it hasn't. I've not wanted it to detract so much from the game's design itself and everything else. It's become now we know what this looks like. Now let's make sure we've got this tool that sits alongside it to make things easier. But I think as we move more and more into the digital space, and more games come out with a physical launch, but then carry on in the digital space, it becomes more and more intrinsic and in part of it, and needs to be part of the planning going forwards. But it was quite interesting when we didn't have one. Obviously with fourth edition, it hadn't been created yet. And, you send the lists out for people to test and stuff. And obviously people are like, well, how do I build my list? It's like the old-fashioned way. Get a piece of paper out, get a pencil
out. Get that graph paper, get that mechanical pencil out.
Yeah, the fun way.
I mean, and I'm curious too, just while we're talking on this digital front real quick, and then I'll shoot it back to Rob. Often when we have this debate, right? Like what I say, we always talk about what wargamers love most after wargaming is complaining about wargaming is their second favorite hobby, right? Or talking about the doom and gloom or whatever the case is. I'm just curious with sort of the prevalence of 3D printing and models. I don't think, and you in the industry, I'm curious what you feel. Will companies always make models? Or will there come a point where 3D printing becomes so prevalent that game design, miniature design companies have to sort of switch their philosophy? I mean, I think there's always going to be a need to be able to go someplace and buy the miniatures that you want. I don't think everyone's good at 3D print, but as someone in the industry, I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
The way we've looked at it is, when metal miniatures didn't disappear when resin came along and when plastic came along, you just adding to everything. And now 3D printing has come along. I don't think the others are going to go away anytime soon. It's like you say, some people will only want to 3D print. Some people will want to 3D print a few bits or some custom bits, but otherwise they want to buy the core of their army because it's easier and it's perfect every time, etc., etc. Some people haven't got either the money or the space or the inclination because it's still quite a niche, dirty hobby. It is some unpleasant chemicals and everything else. So some people just don't want to do that, and I don't think that's going to change for many years. I don't think, but it's equally not something that we as a company felt we could ignore, and rather than either ignore it or say no, you can't do that. It's like no, we'll embrace that. That's another facet of the way that you can get our models and play our games. And integrated with the companion and putting all of our games in there, it means that we can support games in multiple ways. So while the studio can't necessarily focus on Armada as a good example, because that's the first one we experimented it with, in terms of physical releases, because we've got everything else to do and we're quite a small team, we can support that as a game in the Vault and in the Companion, and Epic Warpath will be the same. There'll be loads of new units and stuff coming out, but they'll be primarily, first off, they'll be in the in the vault, and the rules will be in the companion for them. And of course, with your print on demand, that doesn't mean that people without 3D printers still can't get them. But it frees up the core studio to focus on the bigger things like Kings of War and Halo and those kind of things. Whereas the kind of the not side games, but the other games, we don't want them to die and phase off. So we can support them and still bring out new rules and cool things for them, just in a different way.
Well, before we get to lore, will Ambush and Champions be getting any updates based on what's come out for 4th edition? I
mean, Ambush is a small format Kings of War, and always has been. So there are so within the 4th rulebook, it says anything, I think, up to 1,000 points we call Ambush games, and it recommends some rules, some tweaks to the army building and stuff for those. And then there's your standard games, and then there's the legendary games, I think we called it, which is like over 3,000 points or whatever it is. So really, Ambush just exists as a small format games of Kings of War. So there's not going to be any products that say Ambush. You just buy Kings of War and you'll just play it at a smaller scale. But Champions for sure will continue to get new Champions boxes coming out. So as the expansion book comes out and as the new armies get new plastic and new heroes and stuff like that, there'll be Champions ones of those, and there'll be a Champions box that comes out with those two.
Well, let's jump in some more questions. When did the idea for the Zerkali come to you, and where did it come from?
So when did we first introduce it? Way back in the Armada book started talking about it, but I kind of wanted to do something from over in the East, because I knew when we I'm sorry, I'm looking at the map of the world I've currently got up here on the wall. I knew when we did 3rd edition, we zoomed out to the bigger kind of upper and lower Mantica and that area, that definitely wasn't the whole world. And Chris Morris, who was on the RC at the time, had kind of been helping piece the maps together from bits that had been written and stuff like that, and he drew the whole world at that point. And that drawing of the world is what you see in that map of the library from way back. So I knew that we wanted to have cultures and civilizations and new races and things over on that other half of the world. So I think the name Zerkali was created when I commissioned Mark Latham to write for the Armada background for me in whichever book they were first mentioned in. And I went to meet him for lunch and kind of described what I wanted from them. And then he kind of went away and he came back and he threw some ideas out. And you'd think I'd have written this down, but where he got the name Zerkali from. And I remember him saying, because it means this, this, and this, if you tweak some vowels and stuff. And I honestly can't remember how he got to the name, but that's where it came from. But originally it was, I wanted them to be quite, I guess, sort of Mongolian in their term, in their kind of, and the kind of the Mongol Genghis Khan type, where they were going to sweep across and they were coming for the West. That kind of idea, which is where I'd originally pitched it. And I originally had them as kind of Knoll kobold type things. But it wasn't until we were actually sitting down to then design them and bring Kyle in that Ronnie said, no, let's get it. I think what does nobody do? No one does dogmen properly, so let's do that instead. So that's why they morphed from where I originally had them in terms of how they looked into dogs rather than kind of Knoll kobold. So mine would have been quite much smaller probably than they actually ended up being in the end. In terms of the kind of their background and everything like that, that was done very, very early. So probably five years ago now.
Zerkali is a great example of this process of where you're really tying in the lore to the rules to the novels, and maybe touch on that. How do you interface with the authors to make sure that the whole Kings of War universe is consistent, and how tightly do those novels tie into the overarching lore progression that you've thought out?
When Wintersaar first started doing the novels, they were a little bit more hands-off, so that they weren't getting involved in world-changing events or the higher-level characters and things like that. And that was by choice and by design, we decided between us. So they would be writing about like lower-level characters, and they'd be writing about stories, could be anywhere and any time. that didn't then have big world-changing impacts, but still delved into a little bit of world building and character building and things like that. And then heading into, heading maybe middle of third edition, Brandon from Winter's and I were talking about how we needed to flesh that out and bring that on board, and maybe bring some of the characters that people have begun to love from the novels actually stepping up into the game, and back the other way. So when heading into fourth, we said I established the PLC, which is the Panathor Law Committee, which is me and Brandon and a whole bunch of the key authors that can talk together and bounce ideas off each other, and say, okay, well, and I can commission. Okay, so we've got law experts for the different factions and things like that. So then when these books are coming out, I can say, okay, well, I'm pretty sure it's going to be this person that's writing these things. Go out to them, do you want to do that? And then one person will be the key person that pulls that all together. And then, so yes, it's now much more integrated and much more tightly knit than how it started. And it also means that they know the plan for all these books and what's coming out, which means that Winter's as well can plan to, what we've asked them, what they're aiming for is to bring out a novel alongside each expansion book as well, which obviously you saw with there's the Carly of the Callanspire book, and there'll be another one with the next book when that's out, with Fracture. So there's another book in the pipeline, and then we'll be planning the ones for every book going forwards.
So we do have a specific question from Adrian. This guy says, will Faber Ironheart actually get a backstory? And is he an honorable loyalist or a filthy traitor to King Hygalic?
Will he get a backstory? Yes, if he's still in, whoever all of the named heroes are all starting to get bios and stuff written in all of the books, in the kind of the army section of each of the expansion books. So yeah, whichever list he appears in, he will get a proper backstory.
When are we getting a Kings of War and Winged Hussar novel from you, Matt?
From me, we've already had one, haven't we? Didn't I do an adventure game book?
A more modern one that's tied in with the current lore.
Maybe when I've retired and I've got time to write one.
Fair enough.
When he's on a beach somewhere, living in the glory of all that Kings of War juju money flowing down, he can work on his novel.
I can get back to doing things like playing games and painting.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, I'm curious. Looking at fourth, one of the biggest changes I think that's visible right off the surface, right, is the different way we build lists. So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about, as we look at this new list system, what were some of the issues you felt maybe that lists had gotten to in 3.5, and then this new list building in fourth? What are some of its strong points, or why are you taking it this way, or what was some of the thinking? Can you talk a little bit about on the change and how we build lists?
Now, obviously, a lot of people have got very comfortable with how the army building system had got to in 3.5 because they lived with it through its evolution and where it had got to. Again, we looked at it from a new person coming in. Is actually a lot of people. It was actually quite hard to understand. It's quite hard to describe when you're having to describe something in so many words and so many diagrams. It's like, does this really work? Is this exceptions on top of exceptions because there are intrinsic problems with either the rules themselves or particular units and stuff? You're balancing too many things. And it was also it looked, therefore, very convoluted compared to things like Firefight and Warpath and stuff, which were much more structured and much easier to explain. Now, I might not have explained it very well in that blog based on the comments that everyone came back with, but it is a much simpler system. And what I also wanted to try and do was create a system that which made people think much more about building an army that looked like a rank and flank army and wasn't just, I've got 8 dragons and 10 generals and that's it. That's my army. It's like, you've got no ranks and you've got no flanks. So that's why I wanted to. I'll probably get accused of forcing core tax on people and everything else, but I wanted core troops to form the core of your army. That's where you start from. I want to start with my infantry blocks and I can still theme things for some things. Yes, I want a cavalry army or I want those kind of themes, but I have actually got blocks of ranks and flanks, and then I've got heroes and support things that I've unlocked that I'm going to have to think about which ones and make some choices about which ones I do. And I can't just spam heroes, and I can't just spam these big units and things like that. I've got to think about it, and it'll be interesting to see where the tournament scene gets to and where they settle out in their points and stuff, because I might say, yeah, it's 2,000 points, but as usual everyone will say, but I can't fit everything I want in 2,000 points, so let's just play 2,750 points. It's like, well, okay. At that point, where if that's what the tournament scene settles on, that's what the tournament scene settles on. But I think 2,000 points or 2,300, whatever, with a single battalion really forces you to make some choices. Once you add a second battalion in, it's a little more lax, and you will see some people that will say, well, that means I can spam this, this, and this. So they'll go ahead and do that. Typically, that will dominate for a couple of months until someone realizes what the counter list to it is and then trashes it, and then everyone gives up on it. You can't stop that. But that's half the fun of what wargaming and what everyone likes to do, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's one thing we've talked about, right? The community will always the equilibrium will find us a points amount that people like.
Players police themselves in the end.
Well, I'm curious during the playtesting and list design of trying to build these armies where they make sense, right? Because often you hear Alessio and you and also Ronnie talk about they want the game on the battlefield. I mean, we're still playing with dwarves and knights and wizards, right? So how realistic can it be? But the sense is you want to feel like you have an army fighting another army. Was there during playtesting, would something sort of start core and then move to specialist, or start in specialist and maybe move to core? Or what was that process like, sort of working towards during the balance process to achieve this game of maybe wanting to have these balanced infantry sort of focused lists? Did stuff sort of move around the different categories through testing? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, because I mean, when I first, so I'd come up with the structure of how I wanted battalions to be built and stuff, and that got tweaked a little bit as we went through with feedback. But then I took everything, I went through the 3.5 and the latest Clash of Kings, and I just moved everything into these are the lists they're going to be in. Obviously, some consolidation and things like that, where I'm saying, okay, this master list and this theme list, we're just going to make them one list now. And a lot of it was my my opinion of, right, they're going to be core, they're going to be specialists, they're going to be support. These are champions, these are heroes, etc., etc. And then, that was me with my, right, this is my line in the sand. Let's give this out to the playtest group to start getting their feedback on the army structure, and this is how it could look. This isn't final. Now, I probably didn't explain that very well, as I've said in one of the blogs, and everyone went, "Oh my god, this is horrific." It's like, well, no. This isn't what I'm putting to print. This is our starting point for then putting it all into shape. And I think once that was understood, and I started to get some really good feedback from everyone, and so then things started to move around. And then on top of that, it was like, a good example is like the elementals. The feedback is like, well, all the elementals needs to be very different from each other, so let's do that. So there's lots of that where we've then gone. So we've not only moved things from core to special and things like that, and then had heroes. Pick this hero, and then you can change it. They can change these from specialist to core. All that kind of flavor. But also gone through and looked at all the profiles themselves and said, is there enough variety in these three things? Why would I pick that and not this? Okay, well, let's differentiate them more and that sort of thing. So all of that was all part of that list development process.
Yeah, because I know when we were playtesting, some of the lists we were doing is you want to make sure when I've gotten my core and now I'm looking at my specialist, I want there to be things in there that I want to take. Right? Like you want to have things right in each of the sections that's interesting, so that you're not just bypassing specialists or not even looking at your support section because there's nothing good in there anyway, right? Trying to make sure there's cool little morsels in each category.
100%. We won't have got it completely right, and that's why we, we'll leave it for balance updates and things like that. So, it may be that I've got, I don't know, let's pick an example, something in the elf list horrifically wrong. So, in a later book, we'll have feedback. The new playtesting core group will have some suggestions. We'll say, okay, well, let's do this to fix that problem. Or let's give them a new unit option to do this, or let's let that hero unlock these things, that sort of thing. So, we've done our best. We've play tested it as much as we can. You need to draw a line in the sand at some point, because otherwise you'll never release it. There'll never be a 4th edition because we'll always be tinkering with it.
Yeah, well, they say art is never finished; it's just abandoned. Had you guys talked about the work that Jonathan Quayle did on his new formula to balance units? Has that been released at all?
Yeah, that was in the blogs. There's a master spreadsheet which has got everything in it within it, and it all calculates the points. So we can go through and move anything to any category and change and tweak it, change its. Okay, it goes from a 4+ to a 3+, or let's give it this special rule and stuff like that, and it'll automatically recalculate its points. And everything's got the same thing applied to it. So the only gut feel things in there's a kind of a column for a subjectivity column, which is like, well, how do you cost this particular hero special ability? It's probably worth 15 points. So that's the only fudge factors in the whole of that thing. Otherwise, everything's driven off the same model.
So is that pricing formula going to be in the book, be available to actually build your own units?
I think it's probably far too complicated for that. It's not as simple as you change that and it's worth this many points. It's like, well, you change that, but they're a fast unit and they've got this and they've got that, which means it's this. It's much more nuanced than that. But because it's now there as a mathematical thing, it's certainly something that Elliot could look at as a unit building thing in the companion, which would be quite cool. So people could build their own units or build their own, I've got a weekend game, I've got a big siege game or something like that, and I've got this massive monster that I want to do. So I can create check the profile into the companion and it can tell me how many points it is. That'd be quite cool.
Well, we know the Spy Master's listening, and I'm sure he'll figure it out, right, Jeremy? He'll reverse engineer it.
Yes, there'll be some people going in and building their own spreadsheets, like in the old Apple days of how do I build a computer. But no, I think it's good because I know a lot of tournaments love having like the special monster or like a special. You have a theme to your event, and often TOs just sort of do the best they can. That would be pretty cool to have maybe some structure around. So maybe we put that on our special wish list for Santa Ronnie and Santa Elliot to think about. So
yeah.
Yeah, in terms of theme lists, you mentioned they're kind of consolidating back in with the master list. What did you guys do to try to preserve the old feel of the theme lists now that they're rolled into the master lists?
I mean, it will obviously evolve more as the books come out and the lists get fleshed out. So let's pick an example. Let's pick dwarfs. So dwarfs is now a single list, but there are obviously, that's taking Imperial and Free Dwarfs. Now, at some point when the dwarfs come out, we'll split those back out again so that there'll be a free dwarf list and an Imperial one. But for now, they're all in the same list. And it's driven by, so you'll get some variety based on the heroes that you pick. So you might pick like a Berserker Lord will be able to give you, I think, moves the like Berserker Brock Riders and things like that from specialist into core, that sort of thing. But one thing I did do, going back to the data thing in the companion, we pulled out all the number of lists, how many people do dwarf lists, how many people do free dwarf lists, how many people do elf, how many people do Ratkin slaves, that kind of thing. And within those lists, how many people take this unit, how many people take this unit, etc. So that data was used to make sure we covered the vast majority of things still in lists, so that they were still there. And the RC also fed me army lists from several tournaments that I went through early on to make sure that I'd break someone's tournament list apart into the new structure. How close does it move? Now, as long as I got to kind of 80-85%, I was quite happy. And vast majority of them did do that. Some lists were just horribly sick and broken. It's like, okay, well, that doesn't fit in because you can't spam that unit that many times anymore. You can't take three of those those general level things in one army and almost nothing else. But the way I looked at it was that it's a new edition with new rules, so you're going to change the way you play, and you're probably going to change the way you want to construct your army anyway. And the points values are going to be different. So the chances that you're going to be able to take your 2,300 per army and map it and want to keep it exactly as it is in the new and be able to are pretty small anyway. But as long as you've only got 15 to 20% to move around and stuff like that. And actually, I've already got that unit, so it's fine. Or, okay, well, that gives me an excuse to paint these 2 new things. I think that's okay. It's part of a new edition, part of freshening your army up, and the way you can play wants to change anyway. So, I didn't see that as a too much of an issue.
I've looked at ogres and a couple of armies. Obviously, Direct Misfire released the Goblin preview. I haven't personally found any instances where I have models I can't use.
Yeah.
Now I have to build it differently. If I want to take 5 siege breakers, there's some things I've got to do.
Yeah.
In terms of cavalry, we saw that the Abyssal Cavalry are getting all thunder charge. Is that going to be the thing with cavalry going forward, or are we going to have cavalry that still has crushing strength?
I think some will. So there was 2 things we did with cavalry. One was a suggestion from the RC, actually, was that it got to a point where you'd always take large infantry over cavalry, just for an efficiency point of view. So we swapped their attacks. So you'll see that a lot. I mean, we've tweaked them things later, so that the number of attacks that typically a large infantry regiment and horde would get, now troop and regiment, got swapped with the cavalry equivalent. So the cavalry got more attacks and the large infantry got less to make cavalry more attractive. But then Alessio felt that he wanted cavalry to be more, if they got a charge off, more impactful. So he took the TC2 that most of them had and made it TC3. But if they do get hindered, obviously they now lose it all. So he wanted that hit if you pulled it off, but you needed to avoid the terrain. He felt that was much more reflective of actual cavalry. Well, going back to our realism of dwarves and elves.
That's right. No, but I love the fact that you went back to the hindered rule in 2nd edition, right, where you just lost all your TCA.
Well, and I think now there's easier ways with how you move. You have a little bit more freedom, and you're moving when you charge. You can move around the terrain, right? So I think that it's a little easier probably to get unhindered charges. So thus, if you are hindered, you should just lose every. It's just it's a simpler rule, and I think that goes to show all these rules that we've developed. They're not in abstention from each other, right? They go together for the cohesive 4th edition. So that's one thing I've talked to some of our audience when they see one rule and they're like, "Oh my god!" And I'm like, "Well, the whole game has changed, right?"
Yeah.
We can highlight these little facets of the game, but until you're out there and you've played the game for 3 months, I always go back to Matt. There was a time in a clash where they introduced the teleportation rule where you could teleport a character, and everyone thought teleporting Lady Alona behind your lines was the most broken thing. Everyone was going to be playing undead and teleporting Lady Alona behind your lines, and she would be killing everyone. And it was on Universal Battle for like 1 week where everyone was playing teleporting Lady Alona lists, and then a week later no one was playing it because they found once you actually tested the thing, it wasn't quite what you thought it was. So that's sort of my thing. I always go back to when I hear people talking about the sky is falling and I think that's why in playtesting often you'd have playtesters go, well, this is broken or this is not broken. It's like, well, give me the games, right? Give me the data from the games. Are you actually seeing this happen in games? Because it is a distinction between your gut instinct and what you actually see on the battlefield.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm actually, Kings of War, whatever, when I'm developing a game, I'm quite imaginative and I can play the game in my head as I'm developing it, and I can fix rules as I go, oh no, that's a problem, because I can play the game in my head, but only to 80%. That last 20%, until you get it on the table, and until someone else who's interpreting the rules does something, you think, whoa, well, okay, well, I need to fix that. You just can't. Theory crafting gets you so far, but you need to get it on the table to actually experience things. Going back to what you've seen people reacting to things because they've seen this and they've seen that. I think as well because so much hasn't changed in the list, but so much has changed in the lists. People see people say, "Oh, that means I can do this, this, and this." And it's like, yeah, but I know that they've changed as well. So you need to see all of it to see the whole of it to then understand it. And it's but the biggest thing we've had from the play testers and everyone who's and just from me and Alessio playing it all the way through, it's always felt like Kings of War. It's never not felt like Kings of War when you're playing it. It may be different, and this time we're trying this out, and this time we're trying this out, but you always know you're playing Kings of War. And where we've got to is, that's no different. Everyone who's play tested is like, oh yeah, That's Kings of War.
100% of all my playtest games, I felt the same. We felt the same thing. Kyle Timberlake and I pounded out tons of playtest games, and we always felt the same thing. Was at its core, it's still the same game. It's just different tweaks.
And some things worked and some things didn't.
Yeah, and until that is released to the wild, right? No matter how many playtesters you have, there's something about, I got all this playtesters, but once it gets released out into the wild of thousands of players, that's when you see those things of, wow, I never even thought about that. Or no matter how vested your playtest community is or how many games they do, there's always going to be certain things that don't quite manifest until they're given out into the wider community.
Any chance of reintroducing formations in the future?
Yes. I mean, we took them out for now because, all the rules have changed in terms of, new edition, not all the rules, obviously, but people have got the new edition to learn. There's a new way of building armies to learn and new structures and stuff like that. To also then have formations. So I think we need to see how the army lists, how people start developing armies and where it settles out in terms of army size, point sizes and stuff like that and all those kind of things, and probably get through some of the expansion books and some rounds of like the balance updates and things like that before we start looking at reintroducing formations, maybe in the same way, maybe in a different way, who knows. I don't know at this point, but and I think as well as introducing formations, we could go, it might not be the time for, let's say, I don't know, the Twilight Kin book, but we might actually introduce a new Twilight Kin unit in a different book as part of a balance update. Or we might say, actually, we created all of this stuff for the Zakali, but actually they need more options. So in 2 books' time, the invasion's got this far. The Zakali have learned these things about the Western powers and have created these units to counter them. Here's some new units, all of that sort of stuff. All of that's possible.
In terms of deployment, do battalions affect deployment in any way? Like, do battalions have to deploy together or anything like that?
Not at the moment, but obviously there is scope for that in the future. Certainly in big games, you could introduce those kind of rules. If you're playing big legendary games, where say you've got 3 battalions, you could say, okay, well, these guys can only command these things or inspire these things. So that's possible once you know what your battalion structure looks like. It was there originally just to put a different structure around army building. But there's absolutely no reason why we couldn't expand on that and use things like formations in one battalion can't do something else in the other one, or the commanders from one battalion have limitations outside of that battalion. That's all, again, all possible. And that's all kind of definitely expansion book territory and for narrative stuff and all that kind of thing.
Or you recently shared the change in base size for depth horrors. Obviously, I'm assuming that was model related. The models are a little bigger, and
yeah, well, the depth horror turner was always on the 50 mil base because, of course, it's the League of Infamy model, which was based on the 4 squares of movement, and they are big things. So it's like, well, yeah, we might as well just standardise the base size to we can't change the League of Infamy model, so let's move them all up to that. And we didn't make models for them, so it's not we were changing the base size of models we made. We just made models for them at the correct base size.
Do we think there's any more of these base size changes coming?
Are there any more? If it's a model that we don't currently make, possibly. It's probably more likely if it's going to happen. The existing ones are trying not to as much as possible, but because we don't have to rank things up anymore or so much, we just fill the base and make it look like it. We're not going to be as rigid on it has to be 20 models on here. Just make it look full and make it look like a solid unit. Then that means the models don't have to be so restricted. They can be bigger. They can fill the space more. But that might mean that, with everyone, the push for everyone demanding more dynamic models and stuff almost naturally pushes the base size up anyway. But I'm going to try and resist that as much as possible, simply because people have based so much and people have got their armies. Now, if you're starting a new army, it doesn't matter. But for everyone who's already based, I would always go up rather than down, because going down is nasty in base size. Up's easier.
In terms of spells, how are they going to interact with the new cover rules and stealthy? Is there sort of the same philosophy from before, or have you changed that? And do we have a new chart?
Yeah, so we got rid of those tables before, which were kind of across many pages. We just simplified that and said spells always hit on a 4 without modifiers, unless they're a magical missile. So magical missiles have the normal modifiers apply. So then it would be a 5 in cover.
What was the thought to remove the benefit of Pathfinder when you're charging? So obviously Pathfinder used to be if you were going through difficult terrain, you weren't hindered, but that's gone now.
That would be an Alessio question where he got to. I think he spent probably a couple of afternoons going through, thinking about the special rules and going through and tweaking them to how he saw the game working and how he wanted it to behave. So that I think I would be making up the answer if I.
How does Wild Charge work now?
Wild Charge, if you don't roll enough, so you declare your charge. If you don't roll the distance that you need to get there, then you can't charge something else. You can any other movement order. You just can't declare a charge. You can't say, right, I'm going to charge you. I failed. Oh well, I'll charge you instead. Then, if you can't get to that initial target, you have to change your mind. So you have to think about it a little bit more.
Before, you used to just roll the distance and then just decide what you wanted to charge.
Yeah.
Now you're going to have to make that decision what you want to charge and roll the distance.
If you realise you can't charge it, then you'll have to do something else. You can't just keep changing your mind on charging targets.
So let's jump into the range phase. Is Disordered still a thing?
No. So there's no such thing as Disordered.
Can range attacks be split amongst multiple targets?
No, they can't. So they didn't change. So that's still the single target.
In terms of Crushing Strength, is it going to have the same amount of availability in this edition, or do you think there's been a reduction?
I tried to reduce it for sure, and there's a lot less Bane Chant or potential for a lot less Bane Chant. I mean, I did get you got the feeling reading through the lists that there was a bit too much Crushing Strength, and some reading through forums and things like that. There's some moans about it. So yes, we did reduce it where we could. But it's one of the things that when you're running around with massive hammers and beasts and monsters and stuff like that, it's a little bit hard to get away from it. But yes, it was definitely something that was sitting there in the back of our minds when we were going through the lists and things like that.
In terms of nerve tests, and I think we've discussed how they work in ranged, but how do they work in combat now?
No different, obviously, other than that you can't wavering's gone. So if you hit that single nerve value or more, then you failed your nerve test. You're going to be routed unless you're inspired. Double 6, which always used to waver, now does damage instead. Does an extra d6 damage. Double 1 hasn't changed.
Talk about fearless units for a minute. Obviously, their big thing before was they would never waver, and now you could still be wavered from shooting within the withdrawal rule, or maybe you get triggered a waiver. But just in general, I guess, what's the benefit of fearless?
If you fail your nerve test in the ranged phase, then now you're wavered. Fearless units are not. They'll just keep walking. You can't stop them in the range phase. They just keep coming. The only way to truly kill them would be to devastate them and then force them to fail their nerve test. So that kind of the skeletons plodding towards you, that you can't stop them. They'll just keep coming.
Let's touch on scenarios. So I know when we had you and Alicia on, he mentioned the scenario matrix thing. Will we still have some stock scenarios in the book?
Yes, there are. There are 20 in there. So there are 20 scenarios, which are things like pillage and loot, and there's a couple of new ones in there as well. And Kill has gone from that list of 20. Kill is effectively the standard game, which you play for the first few games before you start playing the more advanced stuff. So that matrix is really just about rolling up which terrain map, which deployment area, and then which of those scenarios you're gonna play. But we fully imagine that tournament organisers or people might just pick what they want. That they'll just say, okay, the rounds 1, 2, 3, 4 are going to be these 4 scenarios, and we're only going to play with these maps, and we're only going to play with these deployment zones. So we put in the ability to randomize it because people might like to do that on a pickup game. It's like, okay, well, we don't know what we're playing, so let's randomize it.
What about terrain? Do we still have the 5 categories of terrain?
Terrain categories didn't change at all. So that's all still there. We tweaked some of the heights a little bit, maybe a little more back to their probably started with the second edition heights and things like that. But again, fully expecting that the tournament team will settle out. They'll decide what heights they prefer for tournaments and set maps and things like that. But but in terms of how terrain's categorized and things like that, no change.
I think the biggest change for 4th edition is obviously we have sticky combat.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about why sticky combat, and what's the hope that sticky combat brings to 4th edition that maybe we were missing in the previous versions of the game.
So we got there via, I guess, a slightly convoluted route. It was to solve the problems with withdraw and corkscrew charges, and then it's something that I'd always felt a little bit strange with Kings of War, where I'd be engaged with 2, maybe 3 units, but I can only attack one of them. Why? Why can't I? The 2 of them can attack me. Why can't I attack both of them? But it was almost near the end of playtesting where we got that split idea. We tried going back to pushbacks, and instead of not the attacker being pushed back an inch, we had knockbacks where it was you disengage that way, and then there were all sorts of different things were tried, and in the end it was like, well, why don't we? A lot of the time, people just countercharge or just stay in combat anyway. So why not just make that the default? And if we're staying in combat, why not allow people to attack who they want? Be allowed to split attacks and things like that. So it's kind of, we almost got there naturally. And then you have to, okay, well, what happens in this scenario? What happens in this scenario? What does that mean for the game going forward, et cetera, et cetera? Well, how do I now break away from that? And all those kind of things. But I think being able to split your attacks feels more natural, and being stuck in combat feels natural anyway, because I think it was probably only very advanced players that would look to then move away and just, with no penalty. Oh, I'll just walk away from this combat while these people are hacking and slashing at me.
Yeah.
I think it feels more natural to do it this way. And we'll see. As I say, I think most of the time, once people are in combat, you stayed in combat anyway. You just have to keep declaring that, okay, I'm going to countercharge them again. Oh, I'm going to countercharge them again. It's like, you haven't actually moved. So, let's make that the default, I think was where we got to.
And then how did the idea of only 2 units per facing, did that sort of happen during the same conversation of dealing with the sticky combats? Or can you speak briefly on sort of what your guys' thinking was around limiting 2 units per facing?
I remember that being a decision almost right at the beginning from feedback and I think it was a conversation between maybe Kyle and Alessio, and Kyle running through problems that the current players had, or that the current rules had, and things like that. And Alessio going, well, why don't we just do that then? And Kyle saying, oh yeah, that solves those problems. But so I think that was kind of baked in very early on, and then after that, no one batted an eyelid. And, I know I've seen people online saying, oh well, that means I can't charge 3 in, or I can't charge. I can't do what I used to do. And it's like, yeah, there's going to be lots that you can't do that you used to do, but there's now lots more that you can do. It's just thinking slightly in a slightly different way. It's like, well, if you want to get that 3rd unit in, set up a flank attack and get them in the flank or whatever, which you can do now because you've now got extra pivots, and so it's like we were saying before. In isolation, people are playing the game in their head without having a complete picture.
Well, thanks, Matt, for coming on. We really appreciate you coming on and answering all these questions. And I know it felt like maybe at the end we were speeding up to be a little bit of a barrage to get through as many as we could. And for those that submitted questions, we hope we got through your question. If not, don't worry. We'll have people on again.
Thanks, Matt. We really appreciate it.
No problem.
I know that often players will look at your guys' success with Halo and how many things are on your guys' plate as a company. But I think in dealing with you guys, that Kings of War is still special. I don't know, maybe as we close out, you want to talk about that just with all your other stuff. I feel like Kings of War, is that still Mantic's special baby? I mean, do you guys still feel a big connection with that game?
100%. I mean, outside of a license like Halo, Kings of War is our biggest game, and it's our own IP. So there's it'd be suicidal to drop it or to take our eyes off the ball when it comes to Kings of War. It's developing our own game systems and our own IP, which puts all the value into the company and makes us attractive to customers and players. We as creative people want to build something ourselves. It's fun to take someone else's license and create great things from it. And obviously it's, that can be hugely successful, but at the end of the day, you want to build your own things, and Kings of War is absolutely our number one for that.
Well, I know I'm excited, Rob. I'm going to pick up the new 2-player starter set because I'll do Zerkali at some point. I want to get the Invasion book. I'm hoping to grab one of those nifty messenger bags. And I was like, I'll grab the messenger bag so then I can put a Countercharge logo on it. But Countercharge not even in the game.
Yeah, we'll have to come up with a new name.
We got to come up with a new name for our show.
I think you were throwing out the idea of wrapping around, right?
Welcome to Wrap Around. That's a whole different type of podcast. So
may not be as family friendly as Countercharge. Again,
thank you so much, Matt, for coming on.
That's all right.
Thank you for all your great questions. I think both Mantic, not to speak for you guys, but Countercharge too. It's all about trying to connect the community with the games that we love, to create fellowship among each other in playing these great little, painting our little toy soldiers' pants blue. It's a very special quest in our lives to complete. So again, stay tuned for more stuff with 4th edition coming out. We got some army previews coming out, so stay tuned for those, right, Rob? We're going to be taking a look at a couple of the new factions. And then get your letter out to Santorani. Get those Kings of War 4th edition starter sets under your Christmas tree this year. And I'm praying for a rainy winter so that I can get locked up in my man cave and do some great painting. But any final thoughts, Robbo?
I'm ready for 4th edition.
So with that, remember to always keep countercharging.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Countercharge. Please let us know what you thought of the show by emailing us at counterchargepodcast@gmail.com, on Twitter at countercharge15, or by commenting on the Countercharge Kings of War podcast Facebook group. If you enjoy the show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. Until next time, keep countercharging. Music is a composition of Kevin MacLeod and is licensed under Creative Commons.